Chapter 11. The Climbers. During all this time, the 4 successful raiders, the memory of the great slaughter and feast constantly in their thoughts and dreams, had by no means been idle. The most intelligent of their kind, as were the 3 pullets of theirs, they resolved a number of plans in their minds before deciding upon an idea and proceeding to train for it. Although they had carefully kept away from the farmhouse and buildings since the great raid, they had come fairly close during their hunting after less tasty prey, and in particular had visited an old and rather tumble-down shed which stood in the middle of a field half a mile away. In this shed was a stack of straw bales, against which leant a short ladder of no more than 8 or 9 rungs, and among the bales lived a colony of rats, fat from a diet of grain stolen from a piece of barley ripening nearby. Most of the foxes' hunting of these rats was done at night, when they jumped the barley eaters in their runs between the shed and field. But one day they came in daylight, and as they slipped into the building, the rats, not surprisingly nowhere to be seen, having taken refuge on the very top straw stack. They could be heard squeaking and chattering with excitement, but their talk was all in rodent, a language common to such creatures as mice, voles, shrews, rabbits, and squirrels, but quite unintelligible to the foxes, who spoke and understood nothing but vulpine. They now chatted to themselves in their tongue as they lay on the earth floor of an old shed and listened to the rats. "That ladder," said one, "reminds me. There's a ladder leaning up against the hay in the Dutch barn in the farm." The ladder, in fact, was usually there. It provided a means for Farmer to collect his breakfast eggs. "So what?" said another. "Foxes can't climb ladders?" "Foxes haven't climbed ladders yet," said the third. There was a pause. "You mean?" said the fourth. They looked at each other. "The ladder at the farm," said the first speaker. "It's a very long one." It was, in fact, 32-runger, very long. "But if we learned," said the second. "To climb this one," said the third. There was a pause. "You mean?" said the fourth. And with perfect timing and mutual understanding that made them such a great team, 3 of the foxes ranged themselves in a line below the stack, poised, ready, staring up at it, while the fourth one of the brothers, threw himself at the short ladder and began to climb. His ascent was by no means expert. Twice his feet slipped between the rungs, and his brush whirled wildly around and round in his efforts to balance himself. But he succeeded and vanished from the other's sight into the gloomy space between the top stack and the roof of the shed. They heard a wild chorus of squeals as he pounced and chopped among the sugar barley eaters. And then 1, 2, 3 cartwheeling grey shapes came flying over the edge as he flicked them to the catchers below. Before half leaping, half sliding, he dropped down to join them, with the 4th grey body clamped in his long jaws. So a scheme was born. A scheme which could call for determination, agility, and courage. The foxes had all these things. Thus, while one side were hard at work on the practice of bombing range in the duck pond, the other perfected its climbing technique on the short ladder in the old shed. Partly to compensate for its lack of length, and partly because they realized that having made the ascent of the Dutch barn and done their dirty work among such fowls they would find on top of the hay, they would still have to get down to the ground again. The foxes practiced not only going up, but also coming down, backwards, because they didn't fancy pointing their long noses down the almost vertical slope of the 32-runger. Soon they became expert, placing their feet neatly upon the rungs in exactly the right order, so that they seemed to flow up to the top of the straw from which the surviving rats had long since emigrated in terror of this continual invasion. The foxes knew that descending would be a much slower matter, but they decided they were prepared to take the risk, for by then, with luck, they would have spilled a good deal of blood. They knew that when they reached the summit, any poultry there could easily escape them by flight, but they suspected, rightly, that the top surface of the stack of hay bales was a favourite hatching and brooding area. They planned to kill mother birds on the nest, both those who might sit tight on unhatched eggs and those who might try to protect their tiny chicks. And the chicks themselves, they thought greedily, would make delicious little mouthfuls. Above all, they knew that, as is the case of the great raid, the one thing essential to their success was surprise. They must be up that long ladder like 4 spiders running up a wall. They had no special respect for the farmer and the dogs, though they knew they must not dally. At least the hens couldn't hurt them, they sniggered to one another.